The most powerful empire in the world was not defeated by a superior army, but by 8 words found in a 2,000-year-old sermon. In the early 20th century, India was less a colony and more a continent-sized administrative system. Every layer of the British Raj was designed for extraction, managed as a prison that left its subjects no traditional path to autonomy. The sheer military weight supporting this system was immense. The Crown held a complete monopoly on force, using modern weaponry and a sprawling legal network to ensure that any deviation from the rules carried a heavy cost. This created a closed-loop retaliation. Physical rebellion provided justification for overwhelming force, resetting imperial control. Choosing not to rebel offered no escape. Compliance simply routes back into the same system, ensuring the machine continues to function. Under this logic, traditional resistance was counterproductive. By fighting back with force, the population provided the very friction the empire required to maintain its grip. Mahatma Gandhi looked at this administrative machine and identified a specific failure point in its behavioral logic. He turned to the Book of Matthew, specifically the Sermon on the Mount. He didn't read it as religious poetry, but as a strategic manual for a new kind of resistance. The core of his strategy was the command to turn the other cheek. Gandhi saw this as a way to refuse the eye for an eye reflex that the British authorities expected and relied upon. When rebellion is replaced with non-violent non-cooperation, the system fails to trigger its retaliatory reflex. Without the excuse of public violence, the state's own use of force has nothing to push against. This wasn't a passive plea for mercy. It was a calculated strategy to make the empire's military superiority irrelevant by removing the conflict it was built to crush. The 1930 Salt March served as the first major test for this asymmetrical approach. The British authorities expected a riot. They readied their legal and penal systems to process thousands of violent offenders, waiting for the spark that would allow them to reassert control. Instead, they were met with silence. When officers used batons in jails against calm, unarmed citizens, the machine stalled. The optics of the response began to erode the empire's moral authority on the global stage. The mismatch was so extreme that it dominated international headlines. Long before the digital age, the story of an empire attacking peaceful marchers traveled across the world, turning public opinion against the Raj. The victory of the Salt March was strategic. It trapped the British legal system in a scenario where every act of enforcement only served to make the government look weaker to the rest of the world. This pressure soon moved from the psychological to the economic, targeting the financial heart of the colonial apparatus. The spinning wheel, or charkha, became the primary tool for this economic shift. It allowed Indians to boycott British-made cloth by producing their own. As households spun their own thread, British textile revenue fell throughout the 1930s, straining the industries funding the occupation. Simultaneously, Indian domestic production surged. The population built its own economy while starving the colonial one. The sheer scale of this non-compliance became impossible to manage as it spread across the entire population. The British leadership realized they had reached a breaking point. Administrative control cannot be sustained when a population collectively decides they no longer fear the state's ability to punish them. Ultimately, this approach achieved what armies could not: the dismantling of British rule in India through the steady, non-violent refusal to cooperate. This methodology was adopted by later movements, most notably by Martin Luther King Jr., who saw it as a proven framework for social change. In the 1960s, these principles were used to challenge systemic segregation in the American South, exposing the limits of state violence against disciplined nonviolence. Today, these same ideas are being adapted for a decentralized age, used by movements that seek to challenge large-scale monopolies of power through coordinated non-cooperation. You can apply the logic of strategic calm to your own life. In high-stakes negotiations or workplace conflicts, an aggressor often relies on a predictable, defensive reaction from you to keep the pressure on. By choosing to respond with absolute composure, instead of meeting force with force, you remove the very friction an opponent needs to maintain their advantage. Whether facing a global empire or a personal conflict, refusing to play by the expected rules is a powerful way to change the outcome.